Okay, welcome back. And let's take a look at some of these questions to kick off our coastal community module, if you will, or this unit of the semester. Community being a key theme that the designers of the course set out, and it provides a very appropriate lens to analyze, to study, to understand so many different issues affecting our coast around the world. And so, without further ado, how has our relationship with the coast evolved over time? Do coastal communities have distinct characteristics compared to inland communities? Right, so just questions to keep in the back of our mind or forefront in certain times going forward, and two more for us here. What environmental, economic, and social changes are coastal communities facing? What are the drivers of change? How do these changes create vulnerabilities and opportunities? And lastly, how are coastal communities responding to that change by capitalizing on opportunities, building resistance, or succumbing to impacts? So, even within these, sorry for the blue font change there. Setting that aside, we see some pretty important themes when thinking about questions in geography. Let's just put it that way. When questions in social sciences, questions in physical sciences, drivers of change, resilience, impacts. Of course, opportunities on the other side of vulnerabilities, or maybe not on the other side, maybe underneath, above, within. We hear problems emphasized so much in environmental studies and geography and in so many different disciplines, and it was and still is. It's a really hard part for me personally, and I know for a lot of others in wanting to study about the environment, about humanity, about, well, essentially any aspect in our world right now, even outer space being bombarded by human waste. But to bring it within the scope of underneath the atmosphere, right? To bring it into the Earth, we learn about a lot of problems, and there's a lot of amazing things going on too. But this is all to say, I know for myself, and I'm curious about for you all. It's challenging to year after year keep learning about one onslaught after another. In this case, on our coasts or oceans or the areas of land bordering the coast. As we saw in the neat science art project film yesterday, just the fascinating concept of combining high-end science with phenomenal music. And maybe I can loop back to that later, but maybe therein lies one of the ways in handling on a personal level, on a societal level, ideally even on a political level. It's, not have society and politics, or ecology and politics, be seen as two separate things. Maybe therein lies one of the solutions, is to bridging more and implanting more of the creative arts into our heavy, heady, scientific discussions. And so it loops back around to resilience and hopefully not succumbing to the impacts on a personal or societal level. Obviously more than we already have. There's tons of impacts that we've succumbed to, and that's the gold, the value, the invaluableness of studying these hard, hard pressing, hard on the heart topics. I don't know if you can actually see below shoulder line down there, but I like to touch the heart sometimes, remembering how hard on the heart a lot of these topics are. I think to most of us, this is who were inspired to study about oceanography or anthropology or geography or mathematics because of the severity of change that's happening, and in some contexts we might say degradation, whether that be pollution or the violence. Let's be honest about it. This in many contexts this equates to severe violence and maybe severe violence pigeonholes a conception of one particular kind, but a manifold of types of severe violence on ecosystems, on marginalized communities, particularly people of color and impoverished communities. To loop back here around the world, and most directly to our course, particularly on the coast, arguably most directly in terms of global warming and climate change and sea level rise and storm surges. It is our indigenous and communities of color, indigenous people of color communities that are most impacted. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in political ecology. And I know these aren't new themes to most of you, but perhaps to all of you. But a little bit of intro there, besides just some questions and things to keep in mind, as they say. Grist for the mill, another metaphor that gets thrown out there, probably not often enough. And I like it. I'll leave it food for thought, no pun intended, with the mill. And any mills still in Tokyo? Probably some sort. Tokyo, Yokohama, largest metropolitan area in the world. By some estimates, over 30 million people. Mexico City's probably over that, greater Mexico City by now as well. A lot of these things depend on what official numbers you look at, what degree they're counting migrant communities. And then, contrast that to Hartley Bay, Alaska in this case, a little picture of a quaint fishing village, which, could easily be south of there as well, somewhere on the BC coast, down through Northern California, little villages resembling this. And so quite a wide variability in coastal communities. We can recognize that. And so in having a discussion about coastal communities, this isn't just one type or one class of community, one entity, right? Yeah, beyond description, the variability amongst our coastal communities. And isn't that just fascinating in itself when we try to comprehend the scale of change between a small fishing village and a largest metropolitan area, megalopolis, not just metropolitan. Well, it's both. It's a metropolitan megalopolis, right? Throw out some key geography words there for terms. Feel free to skip track if you want, but that's technically what it is, and never hurts to exercise our lexicon when we're signing up for this kind of course, right? For a geography course, for all sorts of other courses. So the evolution, beyond just our variability, the evolution of our relationship with the coast is interesting to consider. I'll try to minimize the little video box here. A picture of, as the notation is here, First Nations person fishing in the Gulf of California in 1726. So, most likely drawn, sketched by a Spanish missionary, if not a Jesuit priest or a member of a missionary, perhaps some member of the party of the Spanish conquistadors. In what country? Not to try to trick people up here, but the Gulf of California is in present day, yeah, not what we think of in terms of present day California, right? It's south of there, California del Sur. What we currently know of as California was del Norte, or yeah, of the north, Northern California, and much further southern California, California del Sur was. I'm pretty sure that's still a Mexican state, but yeah, this is this is the Gulf between Baja, the Baja Peninsula, and Mexico. So, a little side note there, just to specify. But what's perhaps more relevant about this photo than the location of the Gulf of California is carrying a a large sea creature. Let's just say. I mean, it's a bit mythical in appearance to me. Perhaps a small dolphin of sorts. Perhaps some of you know this species off the top of your head, and great, feel free to tell us. But some anthropological research, or some people proposing that not only did early human communities flourish on the coast for multiple reasons, but perhaps a key part of that was the availability of high amounts of fatty acids in the animals that they were able to eat, as compared to interior communities. And again, I'm no expert on this. It's just something that was introduced in the previous years' iterations of this course, and it's worth considering. These stories of 7 pounds of elk or deer meat that would have to be consumed to maintain sustenance, at least by European colonial settlers. In the 7 pounds I'm referring to is from an account of Lewis and Clark traversing the U.S. North America at that time, and this 7 pounds of meat, because there was next to no fat in it. There's almost no fatty acids in it. I don't know if there were. I highly doubt there was nothing written about eating the brain, but so with the role of evolution, coastal and marine hunter-gatherers, right? There's some pretty big things that we can think about here in terms of evolution of species, if we want to put it that way, right? Or if we want to trace back according to certain scientific perspectives, arguably the status quo accepted evolutionary track of humans coming from sea creatures. And so it's fascinating to think about this lineage, this connection back, and across the coast onto land we have noted here. And so I think this gives us a little bit of inroads into thinking about some of the early relationships with the coast, and to continue on the evolution of the relationship with the coast, the coastwise movement, exploration in many areas of the world, how much easier it was for early human cultures to move along coasts, at least, and then following rivers inland. Obviously, there's, many communities existed in interior, obviously still do not existed as if it was just past, but early hominid and early human development. Well, that's different. Here's the spouse calling, even though I had X'd out of FaceTime on here, then not just X'd out, but forced quit. Evolution along the coast strait, early human species, hominids. I think you get where I'm going with it. That although there, certainly was this interior development, that coast has been an absolutely central part of the early movements of humans, and not only but the movements, but the center of human development. And we see numerous complex societies developing along the coast, and for much of human history, there's been flourishing along the coast, and the land as more of a margin, as different as that is to think about. Generally we think of the sea as the margin, the coast as the margin, but for many peoples it was the interior, going inland was the margin. This is a early map of, pardon if the Facebox is covering up some of the early map here of southern South America, and just a little bit of an example there of, well, at least obviously it's a European colonial enterprise type of map, but what was studied became known by the early European colonists, settlers, imperialists of southern South America. Was this propensity of even Patagonia, although we think of it as a place, a phenomenal place at that. I highly encourage you, if you ever get a chance to go, that you take the opportunity. Some people who unicycle there, or at least I know one person unicycled there. I don't know them personally, but it is reported, and lots of people ride their bikes there. And the person on the guy on the unicycle went there and back to North America. The report goes. Fascinating part of the world, southern South American Patagonia. And but this word Patagonia is the early word given to the people there, that were seen from the European ships. And just a little brief example of communities on the coast in Patagonia. And then working further north up the west coast of South America, this picture here of the Contiki Raft, which oddly has flags on it. So this is probably right when it was taking off from Lima, Peru in 1947. I actually only know about this because I a few months ago on the side of the road, one of these giveaway bins here in Victoria, I found this old book, and I was like, that looks like a really old book, and it has this kind of embossed picture on the front, which is actually this Kontiki, this representation of these early stone carvings by pre-Inca people. And anyway, and so then I'm going through some of these slides from a previous year's professor, and I'm like, I know what that raft is. That's the Kontiki Raft. Although this book was published in like 1950, there's actually some black and white photos of it. And not only was it published then, but this version I found was like the original print. It was still in good condition too. So, and I'm just loving reading it. It's like my favorite kind of book to read are these adventure stories. And so these 6 Norwegian, maybe one of them's Danish, guys get all this support from the American military. They were the authors. It starts off in New York City. He was there, and he's an anthropologist. He's trying to pitch his thesis to these journals and anthropological departments of the big universities there. Nobody believes him that his theory that early that Polynesia could have been reached by people escaping South America, right, following the westerlies straight west over, and so he's like, well, nobody's going to accept my my manuscript here. You know, he had written about this. He had done previous research in Polynesia, so he was fascinated by the similarities that he was seeing in these stone carvings. And maybe some of you have already read the book and are familiar. You know, this news story popped up a few years ago because these geneticists debunked his claims that Polynesia was settled from people from South America. Nevertheless, he says, okay, these you know, the academy, right? Big time universities in New York City. I forget which specific ones he went to. NYU, let's just say. It's not even as big as Columbia, right? So I think it might have been Columbia that he went to, but regardless, he's like, fine, I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna build a raft myself, and I'll sail to Polynesia to prove them wrong. And they do it. You know, he musters together this amazing crew of literally veterans from World War II, and they go down there, and first they go to Ecuador and find these balsam logs. Balsam is a species of tree, super lightweight, and floats like cork, and that's what they get these. They float the logs down this river in Ecuador. It's an amazing story. And then we have them shipped down to Peru, Lima, and everybody doubts that this thing will make it, you know, more than a few weeks out on the ocean. And it's all lashed together with rope, right? And a little hut on the back there. It's all made of bamboo. It's all to emulate. It's all based on the way that the original, let's just say Peruvians, this pre-Incan people, would have made it. And well, how do we know how they would have made it? Well, because these rafts were continued to be produced up through the Incan people that the Spanish made contact with, and there's these elaborate descriptions of these rafts by the Spanish. You know, I guess we could say one good thing to come out of the imperialism of South America. What a brutal history there by the Spanish and other nations. But so that's you know, when I saw this picture in the slides, I was like, oh, we gotta keep this on there. And none of the pictures in the book have the flags on there, but most likely this is because of how much sponsorship they receive from these different countries, right? We see the British flag on there, Norway, of course, on the back, Peru up top, right? It looks, Peruvian flag is very similar to Canada's, and instead of the maple leaf, it has a little crest of arms, if you will, or coat of arms. Yeah, and the U.S. flag, and I can't make out what's in the center there, but yeah, check out the book Kon-Tiki with a Kontiki, and yeah, so you know, what a perfect illustration it is. These people moving across the largest expanse of sea in the world, right? From Polynesia. Well, first off, populating Polynesia, and just incredible. You know, from Melanesia down into Polynesia. It's an incredible part of human history, how that all unfolds, and human development and technological development with that, right? The reading of waves and currents, and if you ever get a chance to see the maps that are made by Polynesians that look like braided sticks, just a completely different form of cartography. I try to include a picture of that in Brightspace. But yeah, and then to think about people crossing from, you know, both directions, if his theory was in fact true, that people crossed from Peru over, but at the very least people We know that there's contact between Polynesia and South America. The sweet potato being key prime evidence of this. And yeah, so coastwise movement and exploration, really, really important in the history of humanity and still. And where I want this to go here, where what we can begin to really, one concept for us to really begin to focus on, and as you've seen in the reading for this week, is this key, not just concept, but process, bond. This place attachment is fundamental to so many different coastal communities, so to so many different communities, regardless of where they are in the world. But many people put forward that on coast is where it's particularly poignant. Let's just say. So place attachment, we could summarize as a bond formed between individuals and their meaningful environments. Maybe they are meaningful because of place attachment itself. Just get these glimmerings of how my hands pop up within the bar there, but it's exciting stuff, right? And importantly, right, the meanings and values associated with place attachment can influence people's behaviors. This is particularly relevant when we start to think through how to affect change, right? How to generate change, right? Affect with an E. How to best understand how to approach these any problem, any issue in a certain area, right? Place attachment being a key there to potentially, depending how we use it, how it's invoked, espoused, utilized, yeah, it's a key for opening something up. So, and there are predictors for this, right? This is the previous prof's exclamation point there, but kind of take issue with how common the exclamation point has become in at least in like text and all this. But by all means, if you still want to tack on an exclamation point in your emails to me, you can. But perhaps it does, aptly apply in this context, because these elements that contribute to place attachment, right, they are not just drawn from in a vacuum. We can understand what predicts, what predates even some of these, and so, without going into that realm too much, it's safe to say, or it's suffice to say, that these are closely related to place identity and place dependence. Huge parts of I'm laughing at myself the way it sounded there, but I used to be this auto salesman back where I grew up, Billy Fusillo. It's huge sales, Tom, and it'd be him talking to his brother, and so my brothers and I still imitate these guys 30 years later. Anyway, this sidebar here lost my place, but I'm going to, because I started talking about Tommy Fusillo. Where I was heading with that is the huge importance of place attachment, and so some aspects here to think through. A heightened sense of safety, even when the place is situated in a war zone. This has been documented and studied and well understood, how people's attachment to place raises their sense of safety. Which is even in a war zone, that speaks volumes to the role of place attachment, right? How it can create that heightened sense of safety. Perhaps because of this fewer perceived incivilities. Maybe that's regardless of war zone time, but to keep going here, I'm already running the clock quite a bit for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so the distress and grief expressed by those who are forced to relocate, and how that's an element of place attachment. Grief is a serious thing, and so being forced to relocate, and the grief that arises, right? This speaks to the depth of place attachment. I think we can understand it from that angle. The adaptive capacity to change, that has been demonstrated, being associated with place attachment. And then perhaps most relevant to this course, the most directly perceivably pertinent, although these all are relevant, but the pro-environmental behavior that can be demonstrated, that has been demonstrated in various places around the world as associated with place attachment, right? And we're heading there in a little bit with this discussion. So some leading authors in this field, scholars, Collins and Kearns, state that the place attachment and local activism in defense of place are often particularly acute in coastal environments. So that's relevant. The ability of coastal places, and especially undeveloped beaches, to prompt awe, humility, and wonder, writes Thompson. So you all can read the authors' names, but it's common for presenters to say their names, right? They deserve it. Say their names. Hey. And that this place attachment, it can speak to the depths of many people's emotional connection to the coast. Collins and Kearns again, and do the confluence of values that contributes to making many coastal places special, as well as the sensitivity of coastal landscapes and biophysical systems to develop. So that place attachment being due to this confluence of values. So kind of elaborating where some of that comes from, right? This confluence of values, what a neat way to think through, and then connecting that to the sensitivity aspect of coastal landscapes, right? Something that we talked about in the first unit, and is all the more highlighted when we bring in more and more of the human realm to our coastal discussions. This sensitivity, the vulnerability of our coastal ecosystems, of coastal, not even the non-living aspect, terrain, dune erosion, and the list goes on, right? Human development on coastal cliffs, and development of beaches, overdevelopment, pavement. So this is all impacting many different slices, many different strata of the landscape, right? What a great way to encompass all these different aspects. Just say landscape, it's geography. And as if we can't say landscape in so many other disciplines. But where we're headed with this, one area where we're headed with this is to take a look at a study that was done a handful of years ago here up on the Saanich Peninsula, just north of Victoria, to situate us for those who might not be familiar with the Saanich Peninsula. And Across a few different municipalities, the survey was sent out to 1,000 different households. And there was 271 responses, and this is the core of what was being looked at: was what does the coast mean to those who live near the coast? What factors might influence place attachment on the coast? Does place attachment contribute to local environmental concern and involvement? And how does it affect our adaptive capacity? Maybe we can see these as broader questions as well to consider in our discussion here. I actually don't know if that last question was asked, but haven't seen the survey myself. But to set the scene here a little bit for some issues on the Saanich Peninsula, we talked about loss of seagrass last a couple weeks back now, but last unit, runoff here, this picture at the Hagen, if you all know it better than I do, creek, the mouth of that creek, pretty distinct visualization of the amount of runoff, thankfully, but with effects, large amount of agriculture on the Saanich Peninsula, numerous other factors, pavements that generate runoff as well, but derelict boats are also an issue, and then shoreline development. I see move it a little bit more for you, but much of the coastline developed with, often cases, very large, expansive houses. And the local response is an area that it's known for its environmental awareness. I should say shoreline surveys instead of mapping, but talking tables, right, community meetings. Some of this took place for this, as part of this survey as well. Community mapping processes as part of the survey, but in locale, where there's a lot of municipal policies. Here we see the shoreline and sensitive terrestrial ecosystems by the Central Saanich. A little snapshot of that there. So in an area where there's, it could be argued, quite a bit of correspondence between the public ethos and municipal policies. Sometimes there's lag there. And so survey population, age distribution, the average was 65 years and retired. So this, speaks a bit to the demography of the area, or at least the folks who responded as well. By contrast, UVic averaged 21 years. And then length of residency of the cohort. You see here, average of 24 years. In the previous semester, they also graphed on here the UVic averages, 12 and a half years, range 2 months to 26 years. So you have over half the population of survey respondents, well, not over half, 48%, 1 to 10 years, almost 20%, 11 to 20 years, but you see 36% of respondents 21 to 30 years. So average of 24 years living near the coast. It's interesting. So what does the coast mean to those who live near the coast? Reasons to live on Saanich Peninsula. Proximity to the sea was a very high one. Okay, speaking to place attachment, sense of community, civic amenities, employment, and then lastly, commercial/business. Things that were responded to in terms that resonate with place attachment: feel a connection, feel at home, quote unquote, fond memories, reminder of childhood, family history, everyday activities, right? The mundane we need to factor into place attachment as well. Often visit the coast. knowledge of species and habitat, right? This another little key insight there into affecting change. If we can increase awareness, education, familiarity, education in its many forms, right? Knowledge of place names, we love that, right? Toponyms, continue living on the coast, and then the missing of the coast. So these are things that people wrote in, and about reasons to live, and it rounds out, or it illustrates place attachment quite well, or things that we associate with place attachment anyway. What factors might influence place attachment on the coast? Well, there's a breadth of different coastal activities, right? Here you see the survey plots, right? Plotted out here, a number of coastal activities engaged in, and then on the x-axis there, and on the y, place attachment. You see, that's the distribution there. I'm not going to try to go deep into the statistical analysis for you here, but just interesting to take a look at the survey. Average place attachment with own or family coastal employment, 4.3, and then without own or family coastal employment, 3.9. So it speaks to how your own or your family's employment being related to the coast. Maybe we see in the back there BC Ferry. How that increases place attachment, to put it simply. Length of residency. We saw that graphed out differently earlier, but in considering it graphed against place attachment. See another association there. Feel free to pause it and take a longer look, but I'm going to keep going. And then distance from coast. See, upwards of 3 to almost 4 kilometers. Quite a, most of the respondents being less than a kilometer to it, and higher place attachment the closer you are. Here we get into pretty specific statistical terms, right? Factors. Feeling a connection to the coast. Agreed versus strongly disagree, and how those correspond to residency in times living there. So does, in thinking about environmental concern and involvement that I referred to earlier, does place attachment contribute to local environmental concern and involvement? So we have percentage of the population here. These are what they would have checked off: not at all important, of little importance, moderately important, or very important. Environmental in terms of local issues, local environmental issues, being the highest variable that was the most common checked, and then planning / socioeconomic under moderately important. So yeah, again, this is the Saanich Peninsula, so it's a unique place in the world, but it's interesting to think through how important environmental issues can be to certain communities. Environmental issues in the area there: garbage at sea, garbage at the beach, impacts from liveaboards. See a little picture of there, and my heart also goes out to people who that's their home, and they need a place to live, and yeah, and we need to recognize that there's an impact from that. Deteriorating streams, declining salmon, environmental issues that were identified. planning / socioeconomic issues, conflicts related to public-private access, which comes up very commonly in coastal communities, conflicts with access to coastlines and property rights and right of way. Yeah, so that's a significant uncertainty about public-private interest on the coast, restricted public access, kind of what I was referring to, restriction on waterfront property work. So the bylaws that restrict what kind of developments can occur on people's private property. So number of local groups and activities, right? This is interesting, an area that's arguably quite involved, a community that is recognized for taking part in its community, being engaged. So you see percentages of the population of respondents anyway, and how they a number of local groups and activities involved with. Types of activities being beach cleanup, stream restoration, information sessions on marine protected area, MPA being here, coastal community mapping, member of local environmental, sort of for the double local there, environmental stewardship group. There's quite a few of those, so it's neat to see a different array of the types of activities that people take part in. What does the coast mean to those who live near the coast? Respondents were motivated to live on the Saanich Peninsula due to proximity to the coast. Respondents demonstrated a strong place attachment to living on the coast. And the authors here of the study on this, being able to demonstrate that in statistical terms. And just to keep going there without getting lost in the weed in statistics, but I know those are very important for surveys. It's not my focus here. What factors might influence place attachment on the coast? Connection to the coast is positively correlated with length of residency. Probably unsurprising, but it's neat to have an actual evidence of that being the case. And it's probably true in many places, but it's significant on the coast. It's positively correlated, and an insignificant negative correlation between connection to the coast and distance to the coast is another conclusion from this study. And then, does place attachment contribute to local environmental concern and involvement? There's a potential relationship between place attachment and involvement in environmental activities. Okay, so enough evidence there to say potential relationship. And maybe that's kind of what I was referring to earlier. Maybe that's a key space for us to clue in on, and certainly the popularity of beach cleanups and all sorts of different environmental stewardship activities. I love this concept of a Bee Earth Day, for your birthday to have an earth-focused activity, such as a beach cleanup, or that could be a river cleanup for that matter, or invasive species removal. Instead of getting together and my personal judgment would be, instead of getting together and boozing or getting whatever, who knows, maybe some people want to choose to do what their party would be and do the invasive species removal. But whatever that may be, how a chance on your birthday, when you get to choose what to do, to have it be a environmentally focused activity. I like this concept. I gotta, admittedly, my choice is to get into the wilderness, and ideally for a multi-day trip, and just have that reconnect. And I think there's a very important value for that in this world too, for our future and our current And if that's not your thing to get out there in the wild, like, that's fine. But if there's any bit in you that could be inspired to take it on, I know so many of you already do. Yeah, there's immense rejuvenation possible in my experience, especially in solace in the wild. But yeah, bringing friends and family or strangers as well. Yeah, so how that can foster a potential relationship with place attachment. And so to bring it back to this evolution of our relationship with the coast, then what's interesting to note is well, one of the things that's interesting to note is how scholars, scientists, people in general in the society are pointing out this return to the coast. I guess it depends, of course, where you are, but they say in many places of the world, well, we'll see later on here some drastic figures of the population growth in various cities, but far outpacing, just to click down to that for a second, global population increase at about 14%, and coastal populations increasing at 41%. So almost 3 times the rate, right, that we're growing. Populations are expanding on the coast. And certainly we can look at all sorts of political, economic factors that are driving that, and in the global north, even areas that if we can use such bifurcated terms, binary terms of global north, global south, but I say that because many areas of the global south do we see these large scale beach villas and hyper exploitative, hyper developed coastal zones are by no means only in areas of, or only in nations with typically conceived of being of high wealth, right? All these binary notions are just being flipped on their head, and right on. Like in so many contexts, it's what we need to have happen, to not be seeing so many places as other, as undeveloped and developed, global south, global north. Although there are benefits in terms of descriptions, right? The terms do serve. Anyway, I'm going back and forth there, but it's what a lot of this is, multiple ways of looking at things. And so, as part of this evolving relationship with the coast, scientific exploration still flourishing, still manifesting wildly in coastal areas. I mean, especially when we think about sadly what's happening in the Arctic and exposure to coast there, and the amount of scientific exploration going on, that sadly, in terms of melting of Arctic ice caps, is where my sadly was coming from. Leisure and recreation, right? It's arguably a newer aspect of our relationship with the coast. As the picture here quite vividly demonstrates, we can think of all the impacts and effects that come with that. But on the full end, on both ends of the spectrum, right? How maybe for most of these people, getting to the coast, getting to the water, even with that many people, is what sustains them, or what rejuvenates them. So we saw some of those stats there, in terms of the drastic increase in coastal populations, population growth, and migration to coast, right? It's not that the birth rates in these coastal communities, cities, are necessarily that much higher than non-coastal communities, but the migration to coast from interior areas, especially because of industry and economic opportunities, right? The pull factors that that exist. For instance, in Dakar, 72% growth from 2000 to 2015. Over 20 million people in the metropolitan area of Dakar, just a massively growing city, massive city, and forget what percentage of Bangladesh's population lives below sea level, but it's just a really important area to keep our eyes on for the decades ahead, and to help, because of the catastrophes in the making there with sea level populations, sub-sea level populations. Some of this we pointed out in the first week or so, but 53% of countries having more than 80% of their population living within 100 kilometers of the coast. Canada being 24%. 21 out of 23 megacities, cities over 8 million, are coastal. Again, those coming from Martinez. So, for instance, Karachi, Pakistan, with 63% growth, just baffling growth figures here from 2000 to 2015, number 5 in the world. Again, what's 16 million, right? Over 16 million people in the metropolitan area, greater Karachi area. And correct me if there's a proper different pronunciation for that. I'm sure I'm not doing it adequately, but so what are the risks, right? Sea level rise just comes to mind most prominently, and all the effects that come from that. Storm surges we'll take a look at in a little bit here, but the figures here, we'll hear more from them, or you've already heard it yesterday perhaps in the science art lecture, the SciArt lecture, but what's to come in this century is very important to keep in mind in discussing these risks to coastal communities in terms of the forecast for sea level rise. And of course there's different models that forecast different amounts, but it's something we need to act on immediately, and not forget, and especially not forget the amount of injustice wrapped up in this, in that the climate injustice factor here. And the political ecology / environmental justice lens of looking at this when considering storm surges, right? The slide I had previously here, 136 large coastal cities now at risk from sea level rise. I'm just going to jump to storms and floods as an example here of storm surges. 40 million people at risk. This is coming from National Geographic in September 2013. So 7 years later, the amount of scientific information and evidence of this is escalated all the more. The models are from 10 years ago. Numerous models have been shown to be underestimating what we're seeing play out. So these numbers in red, we can be certain are all the much higher already currently. 3 trillion. I mean, we can't even quantify what the actual value or risk, but these economists come up with these values, and it does serve for numerous aspects of society and governance and economics to have an actual number or figure there. But to get back here to storms and floods here, exacerbated by sea level rise and climate change. Let's be honest, this global warming to it. If we want to look globally, this increase in temperature, average temperature that we're seeing. This notion of shying away from the term global warming because of the naysayers that can look at a cold winter with polar vortex and say, oh, you say global warming, like, it's understandable if we want to utilize the general term of climate change, but I think there's a value in calling a spade and looking at global warming as well. And part of me puts that out there because you all are highly equipped now with your studies to speak to some of these nuances and realities and the politics behind that, the political ecology behind that. More to come on that later in the term, but I'm sure a lot of you already are well versed in political ecology from your studies. But just as a brief example, how some might be drawn, some media or people to these natural disasters. Well, no, in fact, are such disasters are not just natural, right? There's antecedents there's precedents, there's a specific power dynamic that's involved in the human cost and in the ecological cost, and that we can separate those of these disasters, and it serves us, and it's vital to look at that and to call it. How many of our sweatshop, I don't know where this shirt came from, besides the free bin at school, but where it originally came from. I used to have this prof in university, and when this discussion would come up, he'd go to someone in the front row and have them look at the tag, kind of to where it was from, where the shirt was from, to kind of call out his not to put himself under the bus, but just as an illustration of the widespread distant places where our products come from. And why I'm bringing this up is as a small example of how many of these garment sweatshop factories that we know of in Bangladesh, and the horrific working conditions and injustice that's involved in that. As one brief example of how this isn't natural, how many of those are drawing people closer to Dhaka or a coastal city somewhere else, for that product to be shipped off to the global north? For me, let's face it, not that I've ever bought a brand new shirt from JCPenney's or something. My cousin got married and had to put my towel between my legs and go buy a new white shirt 4 years ago for his wedding. And I think it might have been from looking over there, because there's the closet, we could see, if it was Bangladesh. And so by all means, I'm part of this, but this global disparity, this global geography, the geography of development, of injustice, of disasters. And 75% of Dhaka was underwater in 2004. Lives lost, significant impacts. And then sea level rise, exacerbating these issues, climate change behind it, global warming. And the parting shot here, this story from 2013, man seeking climate change asylum in New Zealand, environmental refugees, as to not just highlight flood or these, more natural or ecological effects of our climate change in coastal communities, but the picture here of a atoll in Kiribati disappearing under the sea because of sea level rise, and especially in the western warm pool there of or areas adjacent to the western warm pool, Kiribati, Melanesia, Polynesia, being the area of the fastest rising seas sea level because of the Western warm pool and how our global warming, that's the, it could be said that that's the epicenter of it, or the area collecting the most warmth, and in driving people, out of their homes, homelands for that matter, to loop it back into place attachment, and right, environmental or ecological refugees as a result. That there's very significant human and personal impacts on these communities and whole nations in this case. Kiribati, I think, even buying land from Fiji, a little bit higher, as a place for its its people to be able to escape from islands that are being engulfed, right? That are drowning, and there was another story of people claiming in Australia as well, and we can certainly see the migration. The huge wave of migrants into Europe from Africa and where they stem from before that, as an example of this same thing, right? It doesn't have to be an island nation to provide example of environmental refugees and having to escape the coast. Or the coast of one area to get to another coast, right? Fleeing Tunisia, or at least that's where the boat's leaving from to get to Italy, and as some of the headlines will tell us. So a somber note there to loop it back around to, or to conclude with, but as we were saying earlier, the reality that needs to be spoken to in these very turbulent times, pun intended, and yeah, I'd love to hear from you all what stands out to you in this, or what questions arise, and across, if you feel like sharing where your heart's at with it, and where we can go with it. The Sci-Art movie there being an example of this different way of approaching, right? This melding together of art and science. I hope some of you can find, at least, if it's not your thing to see those come together, or at least being able to clue in on one part or the other to find inspiration there. And if it seems too weird, too your coastal geography prof, too leftist to come up with this video. I didn't come up with it to present it. It's literally what we're being encouraged to do in these times, is to think of ways of combining. There's these directives from the university to think of ways of combining music into and other art forms to create an alternative means of presentation for you. So not that I totally need to justify it, but not that I need to justify it at all. But if there's just a curiosity in you, like, where is he pulling some of this from? Well, that's part of where it's coming from. So hour and 8 minutes here. It says 108 on my screen. We'll leave it at the auspicious number that is for us, and may it bring all of auspiciousness to solving and these environmental political crises, and you all being able to join that wave. Thanks.